Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy Formula One Podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and tonight we're continuing our driver bios with Liam Lawson. He is the third driver for Red Bull, and he was the kind of the savior last year when Red Bull gave their third driver to AlphaTauri, and then Dan Ricciardo, who's that driver, crashed, broke his hand, and they hurry up and needed a driver, so they flew Liam Lawson and basically overnight put him in an F1 car, and he did very well. His overall price increase, so that's why we're going ahead and reviewing him. Even though he's a third driver this year, he might not see any action. We're going to go ahead and talk about him because he is a player in case anything happens. So he started out a $4.5 million value, which is fine for all the rookies. It's a standard starting point in Fantasy Formula One, at least for last year. And he finished the season he finished his 5 races at $5.9 million value. So he increased $1.4 million. That's roughly as much as Lewis Hamilton increased. That is as much as George Russell increased. That's more than Daniel Ricciardo increased. And Nick DeVries went negative $500,000. So that is a substantial, that's a good performance for him. He had 21 total fantasy points throughout the year over 5 races, which is very good. And his adjusted points per million, he's another one of those individuals that the algorithm wasn't adjusted for. So when they divided his points and did all the math over all the 22 races, of which he only raced 5, but when they did all of over 22, they had him 0.16 points per million, which wasn't accurate. He was actually to 0.71. All right, he had more. He had a very good performance for just such a narrow time in the cockpit. Looking at everything else, so he had 30 overtakes in 5 rounds, so he was a passing machine. Average overtakes per race was 6, which was great. He had 1 top 10 finish, so 20% of his races he had a top 10 finish. As a rookie, somebody who had 0 practice in the car, as far as I know, 0 simulator time, he literally was the best person who wasn't involved, and they were able to sign him right away. And he might have been involved with Red Bull before. Like, it was Formula 3 and Formula 2 days. Like, I'm not saying he was a complete unknown, but he was not signed to the to the F1 team. He had 0 DNFs, and continuing across, talk about his total cost already, 21 fantasy points. And yeah, so he was extremely, just like Daniel Ricciardo, he was extremely undervalued because he only raced 5 races, but he was had the math done on him for all 22. Which gave him the 0.71 points per million, which is very good. Let's go ahead and compare those to some people. So he had more points per million, so Lando Norris had 1.0. But Liam Lawson, all things considered, had as many points per million as Lance Stroll. He had almost double points per million as Kevin Magnussen. He had almost double points per million as Esteban Ocon. He had more points per million. This part blows my mind. Liam Lawson, in the 5 races, because his value was so little, right? Since he came in at the bottom, he came in at 4.5, finished, 5.9. If you do the points per million calculations, he was worth more points per million than Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc points per million was 0.65. Now, granted, because that's just points per million, so as soon as you spend more million on Charles Leclerc, you're going to get overall points. Like, you can't just have you can't have 5 Liam Lawsons in your team and expect to win. You need more money equals more points. But when we're looking at straight pound for pound performance, the Charles Leclerc cost at the end of the season $23.5 million. And he brought in 335 points. Liam Lawson came in at $4.5 million starting, and where'd it go? Hang on. Sorry, red line, $5.9 million at the end, and had 21 points. So again, I'm not trying to say that Liam Lawson is a better driver. I'm not trying to say anything like that. What I'm trying to say is because of the huge value, the huge monetary cost on Leclerc cost a quarter of your entire budget. Granted, he got you a lot more points, but because Liam Lawson cost a 20th of your budget, brought you in less overall points, but as soon as you do the points per dollar, Liam Lawson was a superior pick in that in that instance. He had roughly the same amount of points as Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz had 0.88, and Liam Lawson had 0.7. And Alex Albon, Liam Lawson's buddy, had a 0.51 points per million. So Liam Lawson is definitely somebody to keep your eye on. As soon as somebody's out and Liam Lawson goes to come in, he's going to come in towards the bottom. Pay-wise, my guess is he would be back at 4.5 or maybe 5. I doubt they're going to push him right back in at 5.9 just because it's a different car, different seasons, things like that. But if you ever see on your fantasy sheet or in the news or whatever that Liam Lawson's back in the lineup, he is a very, very strong person, especially, again, like Daniel Ricciardo. If you can get him for $6 million or below, he's absolutely somebody you want to press 100 for, get on your team, and don't look back. Well, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Cheers.